You sit there and wonder why the Montreal Canadiens choose to play man-to-man defense in the defensive zone. Why is it that they don't play a box plus one? Why aren't they overly aggressive? Why don't they pin guys up against the boards? Yada, yada, yada. It's a lot like basketball. You're susceptible to a lot of different things when you play man-to-man, and we're going to talk about that because you asked me to on Montreal Hockey Talk. Hey everyone, Costa here, and before we get started, I wanted to thank you all for getting us over that 1,000 subscriber mark. 70 videos in, it's a pretty good rate, so from the bottom of my heart, thanks. But let's get into the crux of this episode because, after all, you guys asked me to do this. And now, explaining coaching situations verbally without real visual context, because getting actual game video is a pain in the ass from the National Hockey League. Trust me, I've tried. There's a lot to be said about why the Montreal Canadiens play a man-to-man defense. Now, the idea behind man-to-man is really a coach's preference. If the coach is more comfortable playing man-to-man, then he's going to want you to play that way defensively. Now, granted, Stéphane Robidas was never that man-to-man type defenseman, but Marty St. Louis played that system in Tampa Bay under John Tortorella. So it doesn't surprise me that he really does want to go in that direction. But what does surprise me is that he really doesn't have the personnel in place just yet to do it. So whether this is just a slow burn towards getting to where he needs to be and developing the players in real time, or whether it's just, his attempt to try to assess what he's got. I mean, there are a few key points that you need to look at 5-on-5. And so we're going to talk about those points right now, starting with low zone coverage. Now, the importance of covering down low and being strong down low is to be able to clear rebounds, be physical in front of the net, to clear people out, and to be able to get your puck on the stick quickly to be able to engage a breakout. Now, the one thing the Montreal Canadiens don't do is play, or their defensemen don't do, I should say, is play particularly well in front of their own net. A lot of their defensemen choose to front. And why do they do that? It's because it gives them a better line to be able to block a shot coming in on the goaltender. What it doesn't do is allow them to have good positioning to be able to clear a rebound. So you got to get away from that. You look at what the forwards do. And on down low coverage, when the defensemen are down low, your forwards have to get back and they have to cover whoever's open. F1 covers a strong side forward no matter what. So if the puck's on your right, nobody on the left, your first forward back should automatically be going to that player. The second forward back should be covering the strong side point, and then the weak side forward should cover the opposite side to be able to allow for a more fluid breakout. And then, of course, there is the ability to be able to move freely and get into a situation when you have a controlled breakout. I don't really like man-to-man for that because you're not in a preset position to be able to do that, which is why you see the Montreal Canadiens stop behind the net and wait for players to get into position to break out instead of other teams where defensemen wheel behind the net because everybody's in a position where they can be a positive option to be able to get the puck out of the zone and move more freely. One of the other things about 5-on-5 is gap control and pressure. It's so important to pressure the puck carrier, have an active stick and get it into the lane, and make sure you keep that gap control between you and the guy you're covering. Now, granted, a few years ago, the Montreal Canadiens finished 6th in block shots, which means they did do a good job of getting their body in front of the puck. They did do a good job of putting their stick in shooting and passing lanes, and they also did a good job of being able to box out guys in front of the net. But the problem they're having right now is the fact that in puck battles, they're not big enough and physical enough to be able to win those battles. And granted, they've got guys that are big enough. Arbor Xhekaj, Kaiden Guhle's big enough to do it. Mike Matheson to an extent, but he's not a physical defenseman. Lane Hutsoni, absolutely not the biggest guy, despite the fact that he does very well on the boards. And the list goes on. And we'll get to specific pros and cons for each defenseman playing 5-on-5 throughout this episode. Then you look at the Montreal Canadiens' defensive weaknesses. When you play 5-on-5, your primary weakness is the cycle. For teams that are very strong in cycling the puck, one thing that they do is they create confusion, they create mismatches, and they create fatigue. And those are three components of 5-on-5 that you can't afford to have, because then You're sucking on dirty pond water. You can't get your legs underneath you, and you can't cover man-to-man effectively, which creates an open gap and allows for better scoring opportunities to the other team. You also become susceptible to opportunities in the high slot, because if the puck is cycling and your players are getting tired, they don't have the speed to be able to get to the slot and cover anybody that might be there. And then, of course, there's what I mentioned before, the transition risks, in the sense that if your legs are absolutely tired and you're fatigued from chasing guys around the zone, and you're not getting, and the team's got, let's say the opposition's got possession of the puck for maybe a minute and a half, being able to get the puck out freely doesn't happen. So what do? You end up doing the David Savard and flipping it out of the zone. You end up icing the puck, things like that. Then there's your personnel. And I mentioned it just previously. How does Kaiden Guhle play at 5-on-5? Should we, at man-to-man, I should say. How does Lane Hutsoni play man-to-man? How does Mike Matheson play man-to-man? Again, I'll get into the fine-tuning of all that, but therein lies one of the issues as to why the Montreal Canadiens play 5-on-5. Then you look at the forwards. You've got Jake Evans, Brendan Gallagher, Josh Anderson, Christian Dvorak, Yoel Armia. Those are all guys that are strong, can skate, have good sticks, and can be physical. And in doing that, they're able to separate man from puck and be able to create situations where they can get the puck out rather easily. And then, of course, like I said, there's the coach's influence and the reasoning in his head as to why he wants to play 5-on-5. So, put all that together. You look at the personnel the Montreal Canadiens have. You look at how well I keep saying 5-on-5, man-to-man is when Tampa Bay employed it, and how they were able to get the pucks out freely. But the one thing that you look at Tampa Bay back in the day, right, when they were perennial Stanley Cup contenders especially, is they were able to move pucks quickly because they had the defensemen to be able to do it. They had a young Victor Hedman. They had a Dan Boyle at the time. So to have guys that can move their feet, skate the puck up, and be able to move them freely and effectively, the Canadiens have a few of those, but not everybody. And when you don't have everybody with the ability to do that, that's where you start having issues. And now, let's get to the crux of the matter. What are the pros and cons of playing at 5-on-5? Well, let's look at it, okay? Some of the pros is it gets you to use the mobility and speed of your defensemen. In particular, Mike Matheson and Lane Hutsoni. They both have the ability to skate in open ice. It allows them to track attackers and be able to closely monitor them and use the agility that they have to be able to move pucks up the ice and to disrupt plays. The second thing is it forces defensive accountability. So it's very easy to point out who screwed up when a scoring opportunity happens, as opposed to a box plus one where you have predistinguished areas where your player should be, and the accountability can fall on any one of those players depending on how plays come out. Then it also enhances, to a certain extent, transition opportunities. Like, for example, let's say a one-on-one is won down low by a defenseman. If your players are smart enough and recognize the fact that he's taking possession of the puck, you can quickly move the puck back up ice with just a couple of passes and get into the offensive zone in quick transition. It's one of those things that I'm going to point out later that the Montreal Canadiens do not do very often, but it can be a benefit when you play man-to-man. And the other thing is that for veteran pairings, it's an ideal situation. Case in point, David Savard, who wasn't too fleet of foot this season, and it's the primary reason why he retired. But in playing with a guy who's a little bit more mobile than him, like, say, for example, paired with Jaden Struble or Kaiden Guhle or even Lane Hutsoni at certain points in hockey games, all he has to do is give them the puck and allow them to move forward. So it gives the veteran defenseman an advantage to be able to have a separate option to get the puck out of the zone. So there's your pros. That's the reason why you play 5-on-5, because at the end of it all, it's about playing the game with a little bit more speed than you would if you were playing a more physical brand of box plus one. Now, what are the cons of playing man-to-man? Well, number one, like I mentioned before, it's physically demanding and it exposes your smaller players. Why? Because smaller players tend to be more physically fatigued when they have to battle along the boards against a man who's bigger than they are. Lane Hutsoni even though he's a smart and mobile player, he's physically outmatched every time. I mean, it's rare that he isn't, right? Despite the fact that he's got really strong legs, he has a problem covering stronger players down low. And that's a vulnerability when you have extended zone pressure. Then you look at how costly breakdowns in your defensive coverage are. So we've seen it time and time again. We saw it just the other day in Game 5. David Savard chasing Pierre-Luc Dubois. Lane Hutsoni already there covering him, leaving the back door open for Chychrun. And it was the clear case of over pursuit, a lack of communication between players, and just a wide open opportunity given to a team because of a lack of defensive zone coverage. Then, of course, as I mentioned before, the cycle and switches. The thing about the cycle is oftentimes when you're covering a player, depending on what happens along the boards, when the puck is reversed, if there's two players there, you tend to start cycling with the players and you get fatigued. Like, you get tired. And the minute they realize you get tired, let me tell you something, that's when you open up offensive zone opportunities. So if you cycle effectively and use off the puck movement to force defenders to switch, especially in the middle of a play, that creates odd man opportunities and confusion for the offensive team. And that's why playing man-to-man defensive zone can be detrimental as well. It's also very difficult for your lower end pairings to play man-to-man. A good case in that is Arbor Xhekaj. We saw how he struggled. You also saw at certain points how Jaden Struble struggled with playing man-to-man. So guys that are on third pairings, they don't necessarily carry the hockey IQ of your top four defensemen. And so it becomes more difficult for them to be able to defend. And then, of course, it's not ideal for tired and hemmed-in units, which means that the longer you stay in the zone, the worse it is to play man-to-man. That's why a lot of teams, when you see them playing out there and they realize, oh, shit, I'm getting tired, they tend to switch over to a more conventional box plus one. And they play more of a hybrid system. The Canadiens, though, they don't do that. Now, let's keep looking at it. And let's see how each Canadiens defenseman fares against the man-on-man, right? Whether or not that works for them. Now, one of the people that we know it doesn't work for, despite the fact that he's got all the skills, is Mike Matheson. And he checks a few of the good boxes here. One, he's an elite skater and he keeps good gap control. Two, he's very good at puck retrieval and transitioning the puck forward. And three, he's always got an active stick, right? So that's great for Mike Matheson. But when you look at his defensive coverage, he's not physical. We saw that in a couple of occasions where the puck got into his skates, and as opposed to playing the man coming in on him, he kept his head down looking for the puck and ended up getting beat defensively. Not only that, but when he does get pressured, he tends to give the puck away. So you've got to make sure that, number one, he gets a little bit more physical, especially when he's got players bearing down on him. And two, and more importantly, he's occasionally over-aggressive. And what I mean by that is that when a player is coming towards him, he reaches. The minute you reach for a player, you're beat. Unless you actually get the puck, and more often than not, you don't as a defenseman, you get beat. And now, a lot of times, credit to the Montreal Canadiens, there's always somebody there in support. But playing man-to-man, you can't always count on the support to be there. So he's an extremely strong fit to be able to play man-to-man, but he really needs to learn to be more physical. Next is Kaiden Guhle. And now Kaiden Guhle is by far, in my mind, he's the cookie cutter for being able to play man-to-man defense. He's very strong physically. He's good in front of the net. He keeps good gap control. He's agile, and he's got versatility in the sense that he can match up against the top lines, or he can play against your curmudgeons on the third and fourth line because he's got that ability as well. One of the things that really takes away from his ability to play man-to-man, though, is the fact that he's got a lack of foot speed. Doesn't mean he's slow. It's his reactionary time that's off. He's agile. He's a very good skater, elite level, but when I'm speaking about a position elite level skaters, I'm talking about guys like a Sidney Crosby or an Alex Ovechkin or a Connor Bedard or Connor McDavid, where they can change direction on a dime without much effort And it takes him that much longer than them to be able to make the adjustment when covering guys man-to-man. And the other thing, too, and we've seen it occasionally, is his decision-making when he's under pressure. When he has time, when he's got the puck and he has time, he's really good man-to-man. But when he doesn't have the puck and he's being pressured, he can be a detriment. And when I mean pressure, I mean players coming down on him and his decision. Do I wrap around? Do I get in front of the guy? I don't know. And that's the problem. If he's a lot better at making sure that he keeps that tight gap, it'll make it easier for him to make decisions that are more positive than negative. So he's a core piece of the man-to-man system for the Montreal Canadiens. He's reliable in tight checking scenarios, but he needs to get better at decision-making because you see him take way too many penalties, especially when pressured. Lane Hutsoni. Now, Lane Hutsoni, mobility-wise, has all the tools. Number one, he's an elite-level anticipator and an elite-level hockey IQ type of player in the sense that he reads plays very, very well. He allows himself, he can jump passing lanes. He can disrupt zone entries from time to time. He's also very good at retrieving the puck and transitioning the puck up the ice when the ice is open. When there's physicality involved, it's a little bit more difficult for him. He's got quick feet and hands to be able to make elite-level escaping moves. And so that helps break out of the Canadian zone a little bit more cleanly. And he could defend offense in an instant by changing direction, getting a stick in the lane, and go. His stick work and deception are beyond reproach. Elite level, beyond elite level, and that's the reason why he's going to be a Rookie of the Year candidate. Most likely will win it, considering the fact that he broke the record for the most assists by a rookie defenseman in NHL history. Or he tied it, I should say. But, his stick, he uses it to poke the puck away. It's very active. He gets it in passing and shooting lanes. And despite his size, he's effective at angling players off towards the boards. And that's because of the fact that he is an elite skater, Corey Pronman. Now, the other thing, too, is he's really good at keeping a good gap. Even though his stick is the size of a toothpick, he's able to keep that gap. And that, again, large part comes to the fact that he's extremely mobile. What's his weakness at 5-on-5? Well, number one, forget about him trying to battle physically in front of the net. He doesn't have the size and the muscularity and the strength to be able to battle with some of the bigger forwards in the National Hockey League net front. So you're always going to try to get another player in there to try to help him out. That hurts your man-to-man coverage. His durability along the boards, the fact that he gets bumped off the puck because of his size and not because of his effort, can be detrimental. And don't get me wrong, he's tenacious, but he still has trouble being physical along the boards. And he relies a hell of a lot more than most defensemen on stick lifts. And oftentimes we've seen it. The referees, despite their best efforts, call stick lifts as slashes because of the tap and the stick going up in the air. So you try to avoid that as well. One of the things about Lane Hutsoni as well that's really a detriment to playing man-on-man is his risk-reward aggression, in the sense that he takes risks knowing that he can get back and cover, or thinking that he can get back and cover. So he jumps passes. He jumps the zone a little bit. He goes a little bit too early. And sometimes when you go too early, you give your opposition the opportunity to get by you. That's happened so many times at the defensive blue line where he stepped up to try to cut off a pass or cut off a player, and they've made a chip pass around him, or they've chipped it around him to an oncoming forward, and they've created an on-man situation right away because he's got to go after the guy with the puck. So there's a switch, and then the other guy goes towards the net, and then the forward coming back has to change his idea from back checking strong side forward to middle forward. That's what I was talking about before. And then there's the last thing, and that's matchup limitations. You're not going to match up Lane Hutsoni against a really heavy forechecking team and play him against, well, I guess the Canadiens will because he's one of their best defensemen. But it's hard on the kid to be able to do that. Okay, you can't play him against hard forechecking teams. A team like the St. Louis Blues, even, to a certain extent, the Florida Panthers, the Boston Bruins, those are just examples of teams that forecheck hard because they don't have the offensive talent to be able to generate offense off the rush. Those types of teams are going to give Lane Hutsoni fits because they get in there not by one man, but two men. And they come in hard on the forecheck. And then what do? They force the puck off the player. They create a cycle, and then they start to fatigue everybody else. But overall, when you look at Lane Hutsoni, he's got all the tools from an offensive perspective to be able to play 5-on-5 and get the puck, man-to-man and be able to get the puck out a little bit more effectively. But he doesn't have what it takes to do it consistently on a physical basis. Time will tell whether or not that hurts him over his career, but it is what it is. Jaden Struble. Here's another guy who has all the tools. Elite skating and gap control. He's 6 foot, 215, so you know he can be physical along the boards and in front of the net. He's good at retrieving the pucks under pressure so he can get back, look over both shoulders, make sure that he has a clear path to be able to get the pucks out, and he can play both sides. He can play left, he can play right. So that gives the team a little bit more versatility. One of the bad things about him is the fact that his decision-making under pressure is extremely slow. And that's one of the things that I talked about Justin Barron and why I didn't want him on the Canadiens is the fact that every time there was somebody bearing down on him, he always had issues getting the puck out because he couldn't read what was going on around him. He really didn't look behind him, right? And it's funny, I mentioned him. I'm wearing a mustard T-shirt like the Nashville Predators do. That said, you have to be able to be better at making decisions under pressure at man-to-man. I keep saying 5-on-5, and I apologize. It's you occasionally Jaden Struble panics with the puck, and that's what gets him into trouble. If you have more poise and you're more comfortable with the puck, you tend to get it out a little bit more freely, so that's great. Another thing that he does oftentimes is when he does get beat, he takes a penalty, and that's a thing that Struble has to get away from. It's what somebody else gets in trouble for, and we'll talk about him in a minute. And then, it's his offensive limitations. He's not a guy who's going to drive the play. He's there in support more often than not, right? So he's got to have a partner with him that could be a little bit more offense-oriented and be able to get the pucks out. We saw him oftentimes this year playing alongside Alexander Carrier. And Carrier, who I'm going to mention in a minute, is really good at getting the puck up the ice. He's a solid stay-at-home defenseman, but his ability to transition the puck up to the forwards is above average, I would say, for the rest of the defense of the Montreal Canadiens. And the other thing, too, is he rarely joins the rush. So guys that play well man-to-man on the defensive side of the puck, they tend to rush the puck up the ice really well. Mike Matheson, Kaiden Guhle, Lane Hutsoni, to name a few. So if he could do that a little bit more freely and show a little bit more poise, he'd be a lot more comfortable playing man-to-man in his zone. And that's not to say he's bad at man-to-man, but he has a lot of room to get a hell of a lot better. Now, Alexander Carrier, strong defensive positioning. He's good at puck retrieval and breakout passing, which I just mentioned. His mobility and gap control is very good for a guy who's not overly quick, but is very good with his stick and closes the gap very quickly. And again, he's one of those guys that's versatile. He played in a structured system in Nashville. Now it's a little bit more open man-to-man in Montreal. And he's played both left and right, although he is more comfortable on the right-hand side. And keeping a strong defensive position for him is really, really important. Maintaining tight gaps, making sure that he's using his stick. And he rarely gets caught out of position, right? If you look at Carrier since he came over from the Nashville Predators, he's been on all the time. And he's very rarely made mistakes in his own zone, which works really well when it comes to playing man-to-man. But he's a little small. I'm one to talk, but I'm 5'9", 230. He's 5'11", 174. So he lacks a little bit of that physicality that you need to be a good defenseman, especially in net front. But he does rely very much on his positioning to be physical as opposed to his brute strength. He's got a limited offensive upside. He's not dynamic, and he doesn't have that breakout speed to be able to move the puck quickly, and he's not elusive. So that's, another one of those things that doesn't play very well in his direction. And the other thing, too, he also is one of those guys that struggles with elite size and speed when covering down low. Again, you're talking about guys like Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin. The list goes on and on about guys that are quick up front. He has trouble containing those guys. When he does, he's great. but he seems to catch himself on the wrong side of the puck where he's chasing the guy as opposed to directing the player to a certain area of the ice. And that, it doesn't bode well for him. But overall, I mean, he does do very well in the Canadiens' defensive structure. If he was a little bit quicker in his thought process, if he was a little bit stronger, I think it could be a lot more effective. Add a couple of pounds. Get him in the gym. Add 10, 15 pounds of muscle. And he'll be a much better, much more effective defenseman at man-to-man than he is right now. And finally, the Sheriff, Arber Xhekaj. Now, arguably, Arber was in Marty St. Louis' doghouse for the last 3 weeks of the season. And one of the reasons why that was is because he would chase the players. And in man-to-man, you got to know when to chase and when to switch. And it's not hard to switch, okay? If you're, for example, Arber Xhekaj, you're chasing a guy up the strong side and he's got the puck. He gets to the hash marks. Your other forwards, they're covering the D-man, okay? You call switch. You can switch that up, have the forward chase the forward. And then you could switch again with another player. That's all about communication. It's one of those things that Arber Xhekaj has to learn. He's not an overly strong thinker on the ice. He's more of your conventional box plus one type of defenseman, and so that's why he struggles in this type of system. But at man-to-man, he's intimidating. In front of the net, along the boards, he will smash your face, literally. So that works well for him. Board battles, the whole 9 yards. And he's got surprisingly good mobility for a guy his size. But again, his decision to chase players and not switch up or not back off. I mean, if a player gets up towards the blue line, he's not going to be a threat net front. So back off. Cover somebody else. Go back down low, cover a forward that might be there, allow that forward to come up and cover somebody up high. I mean, there are things that you can do. It's just like basketball. When you look at basketball and 5-on-5 and or man-on-man in basketball, players are switching all the time. You could chase a guy into the corner. You get run off by a pick, which we see quite a bit when teams play man-to-man defense. And what happens? The closest player to the guy with the ball tries to switch. And that's what the Canadiens don't do. They need to recognize those opportunities to switch to be more effective man-to-man. That's not to say that Arber Xhekaj can't get smarter out there. But he doesn't have that elite level IQ that a Hutson, a Guhle, or a Matheson have. So it'd be difficult. Not impossible. He's still young, but difficult. So overall, does the Montreal Canadiens man-to-man defense make sense? Well, here's a factor that nobody thinks about. What about the goalies? What do they have to do with playing man-to-man defense? All they do is stop pucks. Wrong. The goalie is one of the most integral parts to playing man-on-man. And it's not so much what he does shot for shot, dump in for dump in. It's about how he plays the game. As an example, if you have a goaltender that can play the puck, your man-to-man defense is a lot more effective because you add that extra man into the fold, right? So the puck gets stepped in behind the net. Montembeault comes out to play it, and you could see that Montembeault's not comfortable playing the puck. His go-to is to take the puck and rim it off the glass. Whereas somebody like a Jakub Dobeš makes passes to players. He sets up the pucks properly. He actually gets to the puck and skates to the puck to stop it, as opposed to Montembeault, who just goes in behind the net and stops it. That creates a variance in the way you play man-to-man. Because if you have the goaltender back there retrieving the puck, you don't always have to have the defenseman coming in to help him. You can have the defenseman off to the flanks, and you actually change from being on defense to offense the minute you take possession of the puck. You're always on defense when you don't have the puck. But when your goalie's got it, you can actually have the goalie start your breakout. That changes the whole dynamic. So being able to have a goaltender that plays the puck is a very important component when it comes to playing man-to-man defense. The other thing, too, is rebound control. If your goaltender can, more often than not, put the puck in areas that you can expect them to, right, then it becomes easier to defend. For example, if a shot comes from, let's say, a goaltender's right, and he has the ability to stop it with the right side of his body or his blocker and push it into the right side corner, then your defenseman can anticipate. So his ability to control that rebound effectively is good. Also, if that shot comes from the right side and it goes towards his left, and you know your goaltender is very good with his stick and can deflect the puck over to the left side and have it go off to the corner, or he can catch it in his mitt or play it off his pad into the corner effectively, then you kind of know, okay, the shot came in from the left. He got it with his left pad. I have to go to this area of the ice to go play the puck. So his rebound control is paramount to be able to defend man-to-man. The other thing, too, is his ability to freeze the puck. And let me tell you something. The Montreal Canadiens struggle with that mightily. More often than not, you're going to see Sam Montembeault and Jakub Dobeš keep the puck in play as opposed to freezing it. That's a no-no for me, especially when you've got guys that can take faceoffs in the defensive zone like we have Christian Dvorak. Whether or not he stays as a free agent is another story. But Christian Dvorak, Nick Suzuki, Jake Evans is very good in the faceoff circle. So we've got options at the faceoff that can get us control of the puck. So you can't be afraid to freeze it and kick in a faceoff. And so the goalie has a big part to play in man-to-man defense. You know, he can transition a play up the ice quickly for somebody who's stretching the puck down the ice. You know, I mean, there's so many different variances that change when your goaltender doesn't have good rebound control. Because when there's a lack of rebound control, you're guessing as a defenseman. And if you're guessing at the defenseman, guess what? You're getting caught out of position. So it's important that your goalies can have good rebound control and are good. They don't have to be great and are good at being able to play the puck and use their sticks effectively. It's so, so important. That's why you've heard me time and time again get angry at Montembeault, get angry at Dobeš, get angry at Primo because they don't use their sticks. Dobeš a little bit more than Montembeault does. Montembeault never uses his stick to cut off passes, never uses his stick to direct rebounds. He focuses more on his pads, and that's not conducive to being able to have rebound control. As a goaltender, learning the butterfly, the first rule of any movement is that you lead with your stick. Why? Because the stick closes the gap between your legs as you make your movements side to side or slide in the butterfly. It's always there. If your stick's off to the side, you're 5 holes open and you're in trouble. And so that's why you lead with your stick. If you lead with your stick and the shot comes in, and even if you're slow to get into your butterfly, your stick's on the ice, you have the ability to redirect it and control the rebound. Now, finally, the last thing I want to get to is the defense to offense transition, which is extremely important when it comes to getting the puck out of the zone. And so transitioning from defense to offense from your own zone using what's called a controlled breakout is important. And the thing about the Canadiens, as I mentioned before, is that they never start their controlled breakout in motion. It's always at a stop. Why? Because they play man-to-man in their own zone. Their players have to get into position to be able to get the puck out more effectively. So they have to turn from defenders to offensive options. So you'll have one guy on the strong side where the defenseman wants to pass the puck, a second guy swinging in that same direction. You'll have the weak side defenseman as an option as well, and one guy stretching up the ice. And so the minute you transition, right, what are your key talent challenges? Well, number one is your mentality, as I mentioned, going from thinking defense to thinking offense. It's got to be on a dime, right? You become from being reactive, defending another player, to proactive, creating offense. And the forwards have to quickly shift from that to that mentality in order to become threats. The Canadiens do that very well, but the one thing that I find in their ability to transition is they keep too wide a gap between the players in their own zone, more often than not, their defensemen and the forwards. If they would close that gap between the two, they'd be much better at freeing their zone. Number two, puck retrieval under pressure, really important. Man-to-man often leaves no safe passing lanes, right? So because the opponent's sticks are in your way, right? So Habs defensemen like Matheson and Hutson rely a lot on their mobility and elusiveness to be able to get the puck up the ice effectively. Then The other thing too is you need to have a structured breakout when you play man-to-man as opposed to ad-libbing your transition, right? Guys have to get back and cycle and swing through the zone to be able to get those options in. You know, man-to-man teams often improvise breakouts based on puck battles and where they stem from, right? It's not always a controlled breakout. It's not unlike teams that have zone regroups, right? And those zone regroups are more along the lines of, being able to move the puck between players and move it up ice because you've got control of the zone, right? So ad-libbing, it's something that man-to-man teams have a very difficult time doing because they have a hard time recognizing where the puck has to go because there's nothing set, right? And then the other thing is forward support. Forwards, oftentimes, the minute the defenseman gets the puck, they jump the zone. Normally, you allow one forward to jump the zone so that you can come out in four. And having one forward jump the zone also extends the defense. So it forces the opposing defenseman to go back and opens up the neutral zone. But when you jump three guys, you end up allowing the other team to come in and pressure your defenseman. So it doesn't allow for a very clean breakout. That's when you see those little flip passes coming out of the zone, and I hate those. Now, how can the Canadiens optimize being able to get the puck out 5-on-5? Well, they've done a lot of that already in having very mobile defensemen. And the exception to the rule was David Savard, obviously, but he's retired now. But if you take a look at the group of defensemen, including the guys coming up from Laval, there's not a single defenseman there that you can say can't skate or isn't mobile. Can they work on their mobility to be better? Absolutely. But even guys like Arbor Xhekaj can move when he has to. So the fact that they have mobile defensemen bodes very, very well. And then, Xhekaj is one of those guys that has gotten used to chipping the puck off glass out the center. You don't want to see that in transition. You want to see him skate the puck up, and he's got the ability to do it. And you got to have, in order to optimize transition, you got to have staggered support. So you always have to have one forward down low supporting your two defensemen. So that this way, no matter where the breakout is coming from, he's there. So the minute the defenseman gets control, your first forward back, closest to the defenseman, has to switch up from covering the guy that he's playing man-to-man against to becoming an option. The second guy has to be in the middle, so he provides weak side support for that pass to come out, whether it's straight from the defenseman or from the supporting forward. And then you've got the stretch pass. The guy who's up near the offensive blue line, ready for that long pass in case that opening is there. And there's a lot of risk reward, right? You send those long passes. We see it often enough. Icings against the Montreal Canadiens. But that's where you prioritize speed over coming out of the zone safely. So you've got those highlight reel rushes where guys send long passes up the ice and you get them coming in quickly on one-on-ones or two-on-ones. And then, you've got the turnovers at the blue line that end up in the back of your own freaking net. So that risk reward, always there. And again, it comes down to goaltender involvement. Guys like Montembeault and Dobish have to be able to move the puck and freely and help by passing the puck, but to bypass forecheckers, and so they mitigate on the mistakes. But those mistakes that they make, and we've seen it, can be catastrophic. So, do I think man-to-man is the way to go for the Montreal Canadiens? Well, let me put it to you this way. They've got all the tools to do it. It's not a conventional system to defend. And, if I'm going to be dead honest, I personally prefer a box plus one, right? Because it gives you that ability to control the breakout even when you swing in behind the net, or what we call wheel, because guys are going to be in a particular position. You're supporting forward. The guy playing the plus one is always supporting where the puck is going. That's where he's following. So it's easy to be able to flow out of the zone. You've got the guy who's on the strong side, comes down a little bit closer to the hash marks. It's easier to do. So I prefer that. Coverage-wise, if your guys are talking to each other, man-to-man, always better. But if they lack communication skills, you're going to get into trouble. That's what we've seen from Montreal. Can they play a hybrid? I think they can. I think they should. Get away from being a strictly man-to-man team and, be able to switch up, change. Depending on what type of offense the other team brings. If the team is more of a transition team and they attack off the rush, you can get away with playing man-to-man. If a team is more of a possession team and they count on getting zone entries in and controlling the defensive zone, play more box plus one. It's not hard to be able to get those two concepts in place and be able to play them freely. But is Marty St. Louis going to do it? We'll see. I don't think he will. I think he's comfortable with the 5-on-5. But depending on how the team plays and reacts to that 5-on-5, I don't know. But tell me what you think in the comments. Did I teach you anything that you didn't already know? Is there something above and beyond that you want to know? Put it in the comments. Let me know. Tell me it's a garbage episode. I don't care. And I'll never do it again. But by and large, man-to-man defense, not the way I think the Canadiens should go moving forward. But hey, I'm not Marty St. Louis. Go Habs, go.